plain on which these fires burn.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street return.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street return.
Riches to the soil,
The riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community. The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community.
Echo. Said money is the faucet through which these waters flood.
Said money is the faucet through which these waters flood.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street refund.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street refund. The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community. The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community.
Echo. Said money is the pipeline through which these storms rage.
Said money is the pipeline through which these storms rage.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street repay.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street repay. The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community.
Clap your hands, everybody.
The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community.
One more time.
The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community.
The riches to the children.
The riches to the children, to our community.
One more time, to the children.
The riches to the children, to our community.
Yip, yip, yip.
Hey everyone, welcome to the official launch of Stop the Money Pipeline's Blame Wall Street campaign. My name's Erica T. Patterson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the campaign director for the Action Center on Race and the Economy's Climate and Environmental Justice Program. I'm also a steering committee member for STOMP, and I was tapped to MC you through tonight's event. First off, can we please show some love in the chat for the beautiful opening music? The name of the song we just heard is Return by Alexandra Blakely. And fun fact, it was actually created for this very campaign launch, and tonight was its official debut. Be sure to check out the links that folks will be dropping in the chat to keep listening and learning this song, and strongly encourage everyone to be thinking about how to weave it into your actions. All right, so we've got an action-packed agenda for you tonight. For folks just joining, welcome to the official launch of the Blame Wall Street campaign. Tonight, you'll get to hear about the wave of creative actions that folks are already planning for the fall to ramp up pressure on our favorite Wall Street villains. And we'll be envisioning what an escalated action in our own communities could look like. A couple of quick housekeeping items before the programming kicks off. First off, you probably already have noticed that we're recording today's meeting. So if you don't want your face recorded, feel free to turn your camera off. Second, we'll be dropping a lot of useful resources and links throughout the time here. It might be hard to keep track of everything, but no need to worry. We've got a doc with all of the links in that we'll share out a couple of times throughout the call and afterwards. And the last housekeeping note is that at the top of the hour, we'll wrap up the event and we'll keep the line open for Q&A for roughly 20 minutes. So you're welcome to drop questions into the chat box throughout the event. And if we're not able to answer them in the moment, have no fear. We will do our best to answer those during the Q&A portion. All right. I think that covers all the housekeeping notes. And now I'm actually going to have us shift gears quite a bit. Before we dive into the full agenda, I'm going to do my best to offer this space a land acknowledgement, which I think is really crucial to ground our virtual space and to underscore why we're all here today. Full disclosure, this is a newer practice for me, and I look forward to continue learning about how to best honor the practice of land acknowledgements. And with that, to begin this acknowledgement, I'll start by sharing with you all that I'm joining you today from stolen Gabrielino land. Others may know this land as Tongva, Keech, Gabrielino land, or so-called Los Angeles. And while I'm offering this land acknowledgement, I invite everyone to share the name of the land that you're calling in from. If you're not sure whose land you're calling in from, you can look that up via the link that's being dropped into the chat. And as we begin today's event, we recognize the history of colonization, genocide, broken treaties, and forced location by the United States government of Native peoples across Turtle Island. We also recognize that Native peoples are still here and are here to stay, with more than 600 sovereign nations living within the US borders alone. And we must also recognize that federal and state governments, corporations, and other entities continue to violate treaties and challenge the sovereignty of these independent nations every single day. We also acknowledge the legacy of enslavement in this country and the enslaved African people whose labor was exploited for generations to establish the wealth and foundation of the United States. We also recognize that the gruesome legacy of enslavement permeates all aspects of American culture and our institutions at every level today. We acknowledge our nation continues to profit financially from the deliberate exploitation of the descendants of enslaved African people. And we acknowledge that the history of the US is one of colonialism and white supremacy. By recognizing that the land was taken from its original stewards and recognizing the forced labor that was provided by enslaved African people and Black people, we acknowledge that the foundation of the US and the roots that it created in order to grow and thrive are in fact based in colonialism, racism, and abuse. And it is only by recognizing and understanding these atrocities that were committed as part of our country's origin story that we can even begin to repair past harms and to prevent them from being committed in the future. So please join me in honoring Black and Indigenous people's contributions to this country and their ongoing stewardship of the lands, waterways, and air upon which we all rely on. We honor and celebrate their resilience, and we commit to creating a future founded on respect and healing the deepest generational wounds by building bridges and mutual understanding. Let us commit to continue to re-educate ourselves about the histories and experiences of all peoples in our communities and across Turtle Island. As I close out this land acknowledgement, I want everyone in this space to recognize that land acknowledgements did not exist in a past tense or historical context. As I just noted, colonialism and white supremacy are still very much alive and embedded in all aspects of US institutions. And we need to do ongoing work to build our awareness of how our own actions may contribute to upholding these harmful systems of oppression and domination. So with that, thank you all so much for your grace as I continue building upon my own capacity to practice land acknowledgements. My hope is that this acknowledgement helps us all be more reflective of the unceded lands that we're joining this call from, and how our current crisis, our current climate crisis, is tied to a long legacy of white supremacy and resource extraction at the expense of Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities across Turtle Island and across the global South. All right, and this all ties right into why we're here today. Big banks, asset managers, and insurance companies are actively propping up power plants, oil rigs, pipelines, all that primarily extract from and pollute frontline communities of color. And Wall Street's bankrolling of the fossil fuel industry is also accelerating climate change and driving more frequent and intense climate disasters across the globe, as many of us are experiencing all year, really, and this week in particular. But in the face of these climate disasters, we see Wall Street keeps doubling down on fossil fuels time and time again. And that's why we're launching the Blame Wall Street campaign today. This fall, we're organizing dozens of actions across the country to put Wall Street on blast for fueling the climate crisis and for polluting our communities. For these actions, we really want to challenge everyone to think about your previous campaigning and to really come together to push ourselves to escalate one step farther. And throughout this call, we will be strategizing about just how to do that. So without further ado, let's take a look at the agenda. First, we're going to dig into the problem a bit further with Alec. Then we'll hear about our plan to win and hear about some cool resources to help your community plan a powerful and safe action with REL. After that, we'll shout out some creative actions that are already in the works for this fall. And then you'll head into some breakouts to connect with other folks about action planning. And then we'll come back as a group to wrap up this call. And like I said before, we'll have about 20 minutes after the call is over for a brief Q&A. So if we didn't cover what you're looking for during the call, hang around after the call closes out. And now I'm going to be quiet and pass the mic over to Stop the Money Pipeline's co-director, Alec Conan, to tell you more about why we're here, why this is such a critical moment for escalation. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Alec.
Yeah, thanks so much, Erica. And if we could go to the next slide, please. And nice to see some familiar faces on the call, and welcome to everyone. If you're already on this call, you probably know what the problem is, so I'm going to try and do this in 5 minutes or less. And as I am sure that you are well aware, climate disasters are currently causing chaos around this country and around the world, and that at its heart is the problem that we are here to solve together through building collective power, through movement building, and through taking bold and courageous action together. The number of climate disasters that are happening around the world is only increasing at an unprecedented and unforeseen rate. Pakistan is responsible for 1/3 of 1% of the total greenhouse gas emissions that are currently in our atmosphere today and have been emitted through the burning of fossil fuels since about the year 1800. And yet climate-driven flooding in Pakistan in recent weeks has killed over 1,300 people and displaced millions. Extreme heat and drought around the world has contributed to a food crisis that means that an estimated 440 million people living in with food insecurity is now an estimated 1.6 billion people who are living with the threat of hunger. Drought has caused the Great Salt Lake to recede by 2/3. Lake Mead, which produces the drinking water for millions of people, is approaching what is known as dead pool levels, which means that water will no longer flow downstream from Lake Mead. They're dangerously close to those levels. Right now, 150,000 people in Jackson, the majority Black city of Jackson, Mississippi, have no access to clean drinking water after a climate-driven storm damaged the city's water treatment facility. In recent years, we've seen that wildfires have burned towns like Paradise, California, and Lytton, BC to the ground, and wildfire smoke has impacted the health of tens of millions of Americans and tens of millions more people around the world. And this is only a small snapshot of the climate disasters that are currently causing chaos throughout so much of the world. Europe is currently experiencing its worst drought in over 500 years. Lakes and rivers, entire lakes and rivers have dried up in mainland China, and many in the nation of Somalia are currently facing famine for a variety of reasons, but one of the main reasons being that they're experiencing one of the worst droughts in living memory, which is made, as we know, much more likely as a result of the climate crisis. If we could go to the next slide, please. And the single most important thing to remember about all of this is not just happening. This is not just by chance. This is happening because a relatively small group of corporations have prioritized greed and profit over people and planet for the last 40 years and are continuing to do so today, even as we're seeing the impacts of climate change begin to cause such catastrophic harm across the world. Earlier this year, the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said that investing in new fossil fuel infrastructure is moral and economic madness. Last year, the International Energy Agency, one of the world's most respected energy modelers, said that to give ourselves a 50-50 chance of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees by the end of this century, we should not be spending a single dollar more in developing new oil and gas fields. And yet, in the face of that, in the face of the climate disasters hitting around the world, US banks, insurance companies, and investors are doing the complete and utter opposite of what needs to be done. If we can go to the next slide, please. US banks are the world's largest financiers of the fossil fuel industry and of coal, oil, and gas expansion. Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America alone have provided more than $1 trillion in financing to the coal, oil, and gas industry since the Paris Agreement was adopted in late 2015. But it's not just banks, it's insurance companies as well. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Insurance companies are complicit in the climate crisis in two main ways. They have direct investments in the coal, oil, and gas companies that are driving climate chaos. US-based insurance companies have about $60 billion in total in shares in the top fossil fuel companies in the world. But insurance companies play a key role in enabling climate chaos in another way. And that is every new oil pipeline, Line 3, DAPL, Mountain Valley Pipeline, every new coal mine, every new fracking facility requires insurance in order to be built. If it doesn't have insurance, it cannot legally be built. And insurance companies, particularly US-based insurance companies like AIG and Travelers and Chubb and Liberty Mutual, are deeply complicit in the climate crisis as they are providing insurance for those fossil fuel expansion projects. And next slide, please. And now we're going to talk about investors. The first investors we're going to talk about are the country's big asset managers. BlackRock and Vanguard are the world's two largest asset managers. The two of them combined control about 17 trillion with a T dollars in investment capital, and they choose to invest hundreds of billions of dollars of that in the fossil fuel industry. BlackRock and Vanguard alone control about $200 billion of shares in coal companies. And another major investor is pension funds. If we can go to the next slide, please. And that's pension funds. Those are our retirement funds. Those are state retirement funds, city pension funds. They also are still investing tens of billions of dollars in fossil fuels. And so that, in a nutshell, is the problem. That is why we are here. We know that if we can get banks, insurance companies, and investors to stop doing business with the fossil fuel industry doesn't have enough money lying around, it doesn't have enough liquid capital in order to build its new oil pipelines, its new coal mines, and its new gas facilities. We know that if we stop the flow of money, we stop the flow of oil, and that is the problem in a nutshell that we are here to confront and to solve by building collective power, by movement building and taking courageous collective action together. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ariel so we can, or pass it back to Erica so that we can stop hearing about the problem and start talking about solutions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alec, for succinctly unpacking this massive problem that we're all facing. As you said, all of these horrific climate disasters really underscore the urgency of this moment. And Wall Street is basically slapping our communities and our planet across the face by continuing to pour trillions of dollars into fossil fuels. So yes, let's hear about what we can all do to take action in this moment, take collective action. I'm going to hand it over to Stop the Money Pipeline's Banks campaign manager, Ariel Smirnoff. And yeah, over to you, Ariel.
Thanks so much, Erica. And thank you, Alec, for that overview of the problem that we're facing. So the problems are huge. The problems are large. There is no denying that. So what is the solution? And the answer is that we are the solution, right? We, the people, are the solution. And we're the only ones we've got. We're the ones that are going to hold Wall Street accountable for their greed, for their destruction, for their role in these disasters that are killing people in our communities and across the planet. They have organized money. We have organized people. And I would much rather be on a team with organized people than with organized money. And this is how we fight back, by organizing, by coming together, by organizing actions, smart, beautiful, powerful actions across the country, across the world, in our communities again and again. So this fall, with the Blame Wall Street campaign, we're going to hit them over and over again over the next 2 months. Every time that the CEOs, the executives of these banks, asset managers, insurance companies, pension funds think they're done, we're going to come right back at them with another action and just another group ready to target their greed and demand that they stop funding fossil fuels. So we're calling for this wave of escalated actions across the country. I'm going to take a moment and talk a little bit about what we mean when we say escalated actions, right? Because that can be kind of a loaded term. And I think we can go to the next slide. Escalation, yes, why now, right? These things are harming us around the world. It's vital that we connect the dots between climate disasters and the corporations responsible. So why escalation, right? It's kind of a loaded term. What we really mean is something that you haven't done before, something that gets at your growing edge as an individual, as a community organization, and as a movement as a whole, right? So that means, can we have more people? Can we be at a more disruptive time for our targets? Can we be taking greater risk for ourselves? I think we're actually maybe 2 slides ahead on this one. I apologize. Can we be taking greater risks? Can we be holding space for a longer time? And I will say, if you've never organized an action in your community before, organizing an action is an escalation, right? If we go from no actions to one action, that is an escalation. Can we go ahead a few slides? Is that all right? One more, and then one more. Great. So I'm going to go through a bunch of resources that we have available so that people on this call, your friends, your communities, your organizations can create beautiful, impactful actions. There's a lot of resources and a lot of links. My colleague Sarah is going to drop in the chat a resource sheet that has all the links that I'm going to go through. So no worries about getting each and every one at a time. So the first is our action toolkit. Our action toolkit has a ton of resources to plan an incredible action. It's got sample rules. It's got a sample press release. It's got everything you need A to Z to plan an action. Next slide. We've got trainings. We're so excited to offer 3 trainings this fall to help groups plan actions in their community as part of this campaign. And even if you're not planning an action, even though we hope you will, these trainings are open for you if you want to skill up. And they're open for experienced practitioners, people who want to brush up on their skills, folks who have never done this before. So we have an action planning 101 training with Patrick Houston, who's an awesome, experienced action lead. We have a basics of civil disobedience, the roles, responsibilities, and resources that you'll need to have an action that includes the possibility of civil disobedience. And we have a training on using art in your actions with David Solnit. And it's going to be awesome. It's going to include information on how to use some of this beautiful art that you're seeing here in your actions, a teach-in on the song that we heard at the beginning of our call, as well as like an overall how-to on how to make actions really beautiful. Going to the next slide. Great. Action coaching. We want everyone to have as much support as they need to do something awesome. So all action organizers, if you're organizing an action in your community, you can get connected to a one-on-one coach who's a really experienced action practitioner, who can work with you, who can meet with you every week, more often than that, to get an action together that you feel really excited, really proud of, and that really helps grow your skills and the skills of your organization. How to make that happen, right? So you can register an event on our map, which is a beautiful map that shows all across the country where actions are taking place, or by emailing Amy Gray, and her email is below. We'll go to the next slide. Action grants. Sometimes what you need to take your action from good to great is just a little bit more money, right? A little bit of money for art, to pay musicians, for speakers, to pay for PPE, people's transport, stipends. So we have an action grant fund that's available, and folks can apply for a grant of up to $1,000 or up to $1,500 for BIPOC and frontline led organizations to support your action and your organizing. We'll be reviewing those on a rolling basis throughout the fall. Next slide. Art and song. So we've seen these beautiful, beautiful pieces of artwork on these slides. You can use them in your actions, right? You can download art from our action or art download toolkit, but you can also have this art mailed to your house so that you can use it in your community. So you can sign up to get these prints mailed. We invite you, maybe you want to consider displaying it publicly in your community, perhaps on or near a bank branch. If that sounds nice to you, it sounds nice to me. And we want to make that available. We also have this beautiful song that we heard coming in tonight and that will play on our way out, that was written for this campaign, that folks are welcome to sing at their actions, to use, and we'll do a teach-in on that as well. Next slide. Mobilization and amplification, right? You want to do a great action and you want to invite new people to come, so we can support you with that. Stop the Money Pipeline can send an email to people on our list in your area about actions that you're planning. So you can just fill out that form and we'll get that rocking and rolling. And then if you have beautiful photos, which we hope you do, we'll share them on our social media, because we want people to know, what's going on, what people are doing. And then finally, the last slide, next slide, press and media, right? We want people to know about the actions that we're taking. We want it to be written up in the press. So we're going to help with that as well if you want. We have an awesome comms professional, Shauna Foster, who is down to help pitch any actions that are taking place across the country. So you can just email your press release to Shauna, and she'll work her magic and make sure it gets sent out to reporters in your area. And I'll just say, because I think we maybe moved past it in some of our earlier slides, the final sort of resource is our action map, right? So this is a map. It's at blamewallstreet.org, where you can see actions all across the country. We hope that folks will feel inspired to organize an action, but even if you can't do that, you can go to the map, put in your zip code, and find an action near you that you might want to join in on and support. So we really want to make this, easy. We want to make this fun. We want to make this great, because that's what makes a great movement. And we want to provide as much support as we can for all of you to be taking actions on Wall Street, which is destroying our climate, and which we We, the people, have the power to stop. So I will end my section there and I will pass it back to Erica. Thank you all so much. And I'm excited to see you in the streets.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Really, really appreciate that rundown, especially the breakdown of what we mean when we say escalating actions. It may look different, for each of us, depending on the kind of campaigning you and your community have already been doing. And just, want to give major kudos to the planning team on pulling together so many great resources to help make everyone's actions more impactful and to challenge us all to really escalate in this moment. So now that you've heard about this massive problem ahead of us and that we're currently living through, as well as some of the on-ramps to mobilizing in this moment, let's actually turn it over to some friends who are already planning some incredible actions. We're going to be starting off on the West Coast with Alan Myers, who's the Executive Director for Regenerating Paradise. Alan, over to you.
Thanks, Erica. Hi, everybody. Coming to you with kind of a serendipitous moment. I'm from Paradise, California. If you don't know where Paradise is, it's in the western facing Sierras. In 2018, it was wiped out by the Camp Fire. Over 14,000 homes were destroyed in a single day, and that included my family's home. 19,000 structures, and over 50,000 people would be displaced and made homeless in an instant. In my life, I've watched the climate change. Growing up in Paradise, we would be certain to miss Halloween because of rain. In 2018, however, we had unseasonably dry, hot, windy conditions that took a spark from a mismanaged utility company, PG&E, and turned it into the world's most costly disaster for 2018. And today, I now live in Grass Valley, and the mosquito fire has erupted overnight to 36,000 acres just down the road from me, about 10 miles away. And I can see from the office that I'm in a giant plume of smoke that is threatening the community of Forest Hill. Fires are not something that are unheard of in California. In fact, historically, indigenous people would burn on average 11 million acres a year. That is huge. Our largest burning seasons are around 1 million acres, but these are very, very different fires. We've been suppressing fire for over 100 years. Add that climate change that is putting a fan on these fires and creating mega fires that the world hasn't seen before. They are high intensity fires that are destroying communities and people's lives, including my own. So in 2018, my life completely shifted. And I've become involved in rebuilding my community and addressing the underlying issues that caused this catastrophic fire. And we recognize that banks play one of the largest roles. Certainly PG&E and its spark was a large role. They were the spark for the fire. But I was just looking up, Vanguard holds $200 billion in assets of PG&E. BlackRock Investments has over 600 million in investments. These companies are funding the destruction of our communities, not only through PG&E, but certainly through the fossil fuel industry, as Alec noted earlier. These companies and the people that are behind them are insulated from the disasters that we are feeling. There are many of us that are already feeling the effects of the climate crisis. Thousands of us, millions of us are already feeling the effects of it. The top people at these companies will never feel them until we make sure that they feel this crisis. They're insulated, they're insured, and they're on a mountain of money that protects them. So we have to go to the streets. We have to show up on their doorsteps and make it known that the climate crisis is here, and eventually they will feel it. I'm going to share my screen and show you what the climate crisis looks like in my own community. So after the fire, I took a portrait of my parents in the ashes of their home. Since then, I've photographed over 70 families in the ashes of their homes. These are friends and family members in my community. Executives at banks will not feel this. If they lose a home in the Bahamas because of a hurricane, or if they lose a home in Tahoe because of a fire, they have insurance and they will relocate. These are our only homes and they are burning down. So coming up on September 20th, I plan to be in the streets in San Francisco with a gallery of exhibits to make sure that those that are working at Chase Bank see these images so that they may begin to feel the climate crisis as we are feeling it now. Thank you all so much. Your passion in showing up. I know that it's a Wednesday evening, but you're volunteering your time, you're showing up, and it means everything. We need you out there. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Alan. I'm just so sorry to hear, that your family and your community are once again facing another climate change driven emergency backed by Wall Street and the fossil fuel industry. So just sending a lot of love to you and your family and hoping that everyone in your community stays safe. And thank you so much for all your work to plan and action. I'm hoping that I can make it up to the Bay to join. And so with that, I am going to hand it over to Xiomara Chingate with Sunrise Project, who's going to tell us a bit more about some really cool actions that are being planned on Black Rock in New York.
Thank you. I'm kind of just trying to ground myself after hearing your story, Alan. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and just bringing it right into our homes, the way that we're all being impacted. And it's not so far away as so many people think. I'm really thankful for your presence on this call and just being able to share even those photos with us. Plus, I just moved away from the Bay Area, so I'm sorry that I won't be able to be there. And in New York, in September, on September 22nd, we can, Amazon Watch and the Sunrise Project, along with a myriad of community groups, are gathering at Black Rock to really lift up the messaging again to Black Rock that they need to stop funding climate chaos and start investing in communities instead, that they need to adopt an actual Indigenous rights policy that includes true free prior informed consent, not just saying free prior informed consent and then not holding their companies accountable that are connected to them while they're putting out wishy-washy statements that don't actually hold anybody accountable. I put a link in the chat there to the Facebook event page for the day. I'm actually very excited about this action. It's going to be really beautiful because we've been weaving together global communities with local community and striving to create a speaker list that will encompass the mixture of people that are going to be there. So ranging from local Indigenous leadership to community activists to delegations coming from Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, all to talk about the ways that their communities have been impacted by the investments that Black Rock is making. And everybody who's around is invited. So we're putting together right now a digital toolkit for people to be able to share out flyers and messaging, which I'm going to see if I can share in here. Maybe I can. But it's going to be at 9:45 a.m. on the 22nd, and it's going to be for about an hour and a half-ish. We're striving for an hour, but I think we all know that sometimes those events run over. And so we'll have local musicians coming, and I'm hoping that New York City climate families can be there, so children can be present as well, and just continue to show Black Rock that we're not going away and that our messaging isn't changing because the demand is not changing. We still are needing the same things that we're asking of them, and that they're not showing a willingness to give or to shift, and to also remind them that we're all in this together. So Black Rock is not going to be exempt from climate chaos one day. We will all be in that same space, and now is the time for us to be making a statement about it and standing together and showing up together. So I can't seem to get my flyers here. Oh no, I can. bear with me. They will be available through also Stomp will be sending them out to everybody. So then if you feel moved on the day of and you can't come, there will be ways that you can share on your Instagram or social media that you use pre-written captions and photos and tag BlackRock so that they can't take them down, like delete comments or anything like that, to just show like, this is how powerful we are. Even if we're a small group in front of BlackRock on that day, we're actually very powerful because there are so many of us doing this work. So I look forward to seeing people on that day and seeing all the work that's being done across the country, even not in New York. So that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Xiomara. It's just so beautiful to hear about all the intention that's going into the planning for this to bring together local and global communities impacted by BlackRock's investment. And I'd love to hear music being woven into the event too, and that it's going to be open to children, or that it's going to be a multi-generational event. So I wish I could be there, but I really look forward to amplifying on the day of from afar. All right, well, now I think we're gonna head down to Pennsylvania with an action from Eileen Flanagan of Earthquaker Action Team. Eileen, please take it away.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated so much of what's been said, but when Ariel mentioned that there are different ways of escalating, I think that comes through in our fall. We're escalating in the kinds of tactics we're using against Vanguard. We're escalating also in the number of actions we're having in a brief period of time. So they really will not know what happened, I think. We're starting with a civil disobedience action that we're not promoting widely, and so it's not on the map. But I'll say that the tactic is to kind of violate their private property, because Vanguard is in a very wealthy suburb with very long driveways and bushes around it. It's not like a walk up to the front door kind of place. And there have been people from the Vanguard SOS campaign who have been asking for a meeting with the head of their stewardship team for a year and a half. So we're just going to go and show up and try and see what's up with their stewardship plans and where is the proof that they are acting on the rhetoric they've put out. There isn't really much public evidence. And so that's an action where we will stay, and if our requests aren't met, we will stay until the police ask us to leave. That's going to be a relatively small group, and again, not well publicized. The escalation that we're inviting a lot of people into really connects with what Alan said about these leaders are insulated from the crisis. That really spoke to me, and it is the reason that we are going to the CEO's house. So Tim Buckley is the CEO of Vanguard. As we heard, this huge company manages $8 trillion, and so much of it, I didn't even know the fire connection, or the PG&E connection, invested in Petro Peru, which is one of the companies impacting people who Xiomara is helping to bring. So many bad things that they're invested in. And so we're going to go to Tim Buckley's house because Earthquaker Action Team was founded by Quakers. We're going to have a kind of silent prayer service outside of his house, but we're inviting lots of people and using it as a chance to try and mobilize more Quakers in our area. We are also very honored to be asked by Amazon Watch and Sunrise Project to support an action that they're taking the major lead on. Again, Xiomara mentioned like these delegations coming, and so there's a delegation from Peru who is going to come to Vanguard and request to meet with them to talk about what Vanguard investments are doing in their region and the destruction. And so Equate is kind of showing up and trying to do turnout for that. And the last thing that we're doing is 2 trainings during this period. And those are not on the STOMP map. So I just put in the chat our whole list of events. But if you are in or at all near Southeastern Pennsylvania, we would love to have you come to any of these, including the trainings. Like maybe you're organizing in New York, but you would like to come to Philly and get a little extra in-person civil disobedience training on a weekend. Please, you are welcome to join. I think that this project of connecting the impacts of violating Indigenous rights, of environmental racism, of the destruction of this system, including climate change, but not only climate change, we really have to take it to their doorsteps, as we heard, so that everyone who's profiting from this feels the urgency that everyone else in the world is feeling from the problems. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Eileen. It's been really cool to see the actions come to life after getting to listen in on the planning in the Vanguard SOS table with you. And also very powerful to hear about how the faith community is mobilizing in this moment. And yeah, I always love a good bird dogging action where we're literally bringing the crises of frontline communities to Wall Street's doorsteps. All right, well, we've got a few insurance actions planned in Chicago, and I'll share about those since the organizers aren't here today to share out directly. But in late October, Rainforest Action Network, Public Citizen, and some other allies are planning an action targeting Chubb at their headquarters in New York City, where they'll be calling out Chubb for being one of the world's largest oil and gas insurers, with ties to fossil fuel expansion projects in the Arctic and Brazil. So I hope y'all can check that out, and there'll be more details to come that you can check out on the map. And then on September 23rd, climate activists in Chicago have assembled a coalition of more than a dozen progressive climate and or EJ groups from Illinois and Wisconsin that are all going to be converging on Chicago for the next Global Climate Strike Day. Sounds like folks will be marching through the city and will be stopping at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, Chase Bank, and BP's North American Pipelines office. So yeah, the coalition's calling on the Fed to make climate risk front and center in all financial decisions, to end fossil fuel financing, and to promote green investments and green lending, particularly to frontline communities. I should mention that the coalition's also demanding that Chase stop funding climate chaos and live up to their ESG commitments. And want to underscore that youth groups will be front and center in the action, and that they'll be emphasizing how the futures of younger generations and BIPOC communities are most at risk, while corporations like Chase and BP continue to line their pockets with profits from the climate crisis. So I think that is a good roundup of some of the actions that we've got planned already. And now we want to take some time to put our heads together to strategize about what an escalated action or a series of actions could look like for your group and your community. So we're running a little short on time, but we're going to move into some small, quick breakouts and want people to discuss 3 questions with your group. First one is, how do you plan to get involved in Blame Wall Street? Are you planning on organizing an action, attending one? If so, what are your next steps? And maybe try to take a couple of notes so that when we come back, we'd love to hear a couple quick ideas about what came out of your discussions. All right, let's get into some breakouts. All right, I think we're approaching critical mass. So welcome back, everyone. Why don't folks drop an emoji in the chat and just share how you're feeling after the breakout. I wish we had a little more time for share outs, but I am super pumped to see your actions come to life over the next few months. And I hope to see many of you in the streets this fall. But at this point, we're gonna just close out the call, before I do that, a couple of quick reminders. Please sign up to get your hands on some beautiful art to incorporate into your actions. Make sure to RSVP for some of the trainings that Ariel talked about to help your community plan an action. And once you've got an action in the works, please add it to the action map so that we can all see the wave of escalating actions over the next few months coming to life. And then if you've got any follow-up questions that we didn't cover on the call, you can either reach out to Ariel or feel free to hang on the line for 20 more minutes or so, and we'll do some Q&A with the event organizers. So with that, we're gonna be hopping off and closing out the call officially, but hang tight through the song. Thanks so much for joining the Blame Wall Street campaign launch. Super stoked to make Jamie Dimons and the Larry Finks of the world panic this fall. Take care, and yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
These fires burn.
Said money is the gasoline on which these fires burn.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street return.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street return. The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community. The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community.
Echo. Said money is the faucet through which these waters flood.
Said money is the faucet through which these waters flood.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street refund.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street refund. The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community. The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community.
Echo. Said money is the pipeline through which these storms rage.
Said money is the pipeline through which these storms rage.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street repay.
So we're here to shout it out, make Wall Street repay. The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community.
Clap your hands, everybody.
The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community.
One more time.
The riches to the soil, the riches to the sea, the riches to the children, to our community. The riches to the children, to our community.
One more time, to the children.
The riches to the children, to our community.
Right. Thanks y'all for hanging on the line. Now we're going to transition into some Q&A. I think there may be a stack forming, and I know that some of my colleagues have been pulling through the chat some of the questions for the end of the call. So maybe I'll turn it over to them at this point in case there's already questions in the queue.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. We both went at once. We're so eager. If you do have any other questions, yeah, we've got 20 minutes now, so feel free to drop your questions in the chat box, and we'll try and get to as many as possible. The first question, couple of simple questions first, and I'll just ask the questions, and if any of my fellow panelists and colleagues can just come off mute and answer them, and that would be great. But the first questions were, will there be a recording? Will the links be shared out?
there is a recording, and there's a really fantastic centralized document that has all of the links to how to sign up for art, how to register for the trainings, and how to get your action on the action planning map. So that'll be coming around. Probably also a couple links in the chat that we could drop now to link to that. But yes, it has been recorded, and we'll be sending it out after, I think, tomorrow.
Where is she?
Yes, thank you, Erica. There will be an email going out tomorrow, but as Erica said, Sarah, would you be able to drop the resources doc again? Because we will pretty much just be emailing you the resources doc, because that is our one-stop shop for everything you need to know about this campaign. And we will also include a recording of this as well, so you can rewatch it or share it with others if you like. The next question we had here, and thank you, Sarah and others who are copying the questions from the chat into our Q&A doc here. I can answer this one. What is the name of the song? The song is called Return, and I think you can find links to that in the resources doc. In the arts toolkit, there's actually lyrics for the song as well. It is very much being written as a song that is meant to be sung in community. It's meant to be sung in the streets. It's meant to be sung while you're occupying bank branches. It's meant to be sung while you're blockading the doors to headquarters and offices, arm in arm with your comrades. So the lyrics are in the arts toolkit, which again is in the resources doc. And we have a question for Alan here. Alan, is it okay with you for people to talk about your work and ask others to go to your website and see your photos and read your stories?
Thanks. Yes, absolutely. Our community organization website is regeneratingparadise.org. The photography, some of that is unpublished. Currently, the strategy is to find, like, Times or The Atlantic or Nat Geo, somebody who's interested in publishing it. And that requires that it be, at this point, an unpublished series, like an exclusive series. That's kind of like the process. Then my goal is to have it much more available, but currently it's limited to these type of actions, just to protect the exclusivity of it until we get it published.
Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate that. And unfortunately, we don't have names attached to the questions here, but we do have an interesting question. And Ariel, I'm wondering if you might be well positioned to answer this. Someone is meeting with Morgan Stanley next week. What questions would you like me to ask them?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. I think that was the person whose name is iPad QR code. But if you want to share in the chat or off mute who at Morgan Stanley you're meeting with, if you're able to.
My name is Stan Rothbart. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm the gentleman that came all the way from Florida, lives there, that came to Chicago to visit my family and also meet with my financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. And I'm meeting with him next week. I appreciate all your statistics. I'm very familiar with Wall Street because I'm involved with it way back when, from many different points of view, financial, auditing, etc. However, I would like to know what you'd like to learn from Morgan Stanley that you would like me to ask them, other than what I'm already planning to do, and that is, how are you going to get greener investments? You must have a better idea than just that, I would hope.
Yeah, so Morgan Stanley, particularly meeting with a financial advisor, I would say the thing that we want Morgan Stanley to do is to stop financing fossil expansion. So we anticipate that there's going to be pushback where they're going to be like, well, why don't we just put your money into an ESG fund? Why don't we just, whatever. And I would just say to push back really strongly on that. It's not about the investments, it's about the cash in the bank. And I put my money, my paycheck goes into the bank lends it out. And the bank is not lending it out to support a small business in my community. The bank is lending it out to build a new pipeline, right? So that is what we want. So for your financial advisor, we're actually trying to create some internal agitation among these financial institutions. Among that staff, we know financial advising is an area that they're really concerned about. So what we want the financial advisors to do is to go to their bosses and say, listen, my customers are really upset about this. We want to keep our customers happy. What is our plan to move this forward, right? So that they're hearing internally that it's going to be a problem for their bottom line. So I would say that is the sort of main thing that we want the financial advisor to do. We can talk a little bit more specifically about Morgan Stanley's particular brand of evil here, right? Which is like, they're highly, highly involved in liquefied natural gas, which is hugely destructive for communities in the Gulf South. But I would say that is the sort of main thing that we're trying to do, is create, in terms of those meetings, create that internal division so that the money-making arms of the banks are going to their bosses and being like, we're going to lose money if we don't get this together. So I hope that's helpful.
Well, BlackRock is big with Morgan Stanley, and they use it for a lot of investment, all right? My goal is to get the people who invest with Morgan Stanley to convince Morgan Stanley not to invest in these things and show they can still get a good ROI, return on investment. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And I would love to connect about more of this offline. This is some like other work that we're trying to build, is this kind of like internal disruption. So I'm going to put my email in the chat, and maybe we can continue this conversation later this or next week.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stan. And Ariel and myself actually met with Morgan Stanley's risk committee people and head of sustainability people. So if Sarah hasn't already, Ariel can share the slide deck that we presented to the Morgan Stanley folks, which has some facts and figures in there about Morgan Stanley's fossil financing as well. But we've got just 10 minutes more for Q&A, so I want to keep us moving through some questions here, and wondering if anyone wants to take this one. What do you think of standing in front of neighborhood banks with signs? Is that worth our time?
I have an answer to that. I think the answer to that is yes. We're talking about escalation. So if your bank branch in your community has not been targeted for a protest or a demonstration before, absolutely. I would say the next step is to try to stand inside the bank with signs. So if that is achievable to you, I would encourage that as well. So absolutely. If what's available to you right now is standing outside of the bank with signs, they're going to notice. It's going to bother them. If you think you can take it one step further and go inside the branch, I would encourage that as well. I wonder if any of the other sort of host organizers have a response.
I can just share my 2 cents. Sorry, Alan, were you going to share something there? Sorry, I'm off mute.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, please, you go. I'm talking a lot.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that, as I was saying before, a lot of these folks are insulated from the climate crisis. And the point is to make sure that they feel it in some way. And if they have, if the top people at a bank has their managers at a lower bank calling up and saying, this happened today, what are we going to do about it? We want them to make that call. And they're going to make that call if we're showing up. So absolutely.
Thank you, Alan. Couldn't agree more. It all adds up, and that's what a movement is. It is thousands or tens of thousands of actions from the small to the very large. So fully supportive of people demonstrating outside as many bank branches as possible. A couple of questions here. I can try and take these. Any thoughts about events happening with both Stop the Money Pipeline and other organizations, such as Green Faiths for Climate Justice campaign? Any problem with registering an event with both campaigns? I think the basic answer to that is no. We work very closely with Green Faith. I just had a a meeting with Amy Brooks Paradise from Green Faith last week, and they're fully supportive of the Blame Wall Street campaign. We're fully supportive of the organizing that they're doing. I know that we're supporting with some action grants, some Green Faith actions, potentially one that Michael, who's put his hand up, is involved in. Yeah, fully encouraging of people, if it means putting your event on both maps, to please do so. And Michael, I saw you had your hand up there, so is there something you wanted to add there?
No, just to say that we're part of one of the larger green face circles in the country in upstate New York. And we're doing an event at TD Bank in Albany. And we're doing it under both banners of Faith for Climate Justice as well as Blame Wall Street. And Ariel, you rock. She's working with us on this.
It's great to hear. I will plus one that. And another question here, which is an important one. As folks heard, we are mailing climate art out to people, and we are training people how to use wheat paste and also how to put those posters up in a variety of ways, put them on banners, put them on placards, use them in your actions. But the question was, what can we be charged with for pasting up art on a building's wall? And I wish David Solnit was still on the call, but he's hopped off because he would be best placed to answer that. We will go into this more in depth on the training that we're doing on September 29th. But I will say it is not legal to wheat paste a poster on the wall of a private building, and you should be very well aware of that if engaging in that sort of activity. Specifically if it is a bank wall, though, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to say what kind of charge would be likely. It also varies from city to city. I know that in San Francisco, some activists walked up to Wells Fargo's headquarters in broad daylight and wheat pasted a bunch of art on the front doors, and the security came out and looked at them and turned and walked away and didn't do anything. Similarly, in Seattle, we've wheat pasted the art up in a lot of different places, and I think we feel like the risk is pretty low, but it does vary from city to city. So we're not telling you to do anything. We're simply providing the art. And certainly there are lots of places where you can put that art up with no legal risk. You can put it up in your garden, on your garden fence. A kind of community bulletin board. You could put it up on a coffee shop bulletin board. There are a lot of options if you're not willing to take any sort of legal risk. But the climate crisis is very serious, and a lot of people are prepared to take some sort of legal risk to do something about it. But think about that very carefully in your own community, and we're not able to give kind of blanket advice because it varies from city to city so much. And if anyone wants to talk more about that, you can email me. I'll drop my email in the chat, and happy to talk more about that. Let's
Alec,
next question. Yeah, please, Alan.
Sorry, I just want to add to that. Alec is absolutely right. It's really going to depend on the municipality that you're in. And it's also going to depend on what you're willing to risk. So know your own risk comfort. Some backup options, some things that I've seen effective is if you take, a giant piece of cardboard or even plywood, you can wheat paste the image onto that, and then go up to the bank and lean it against the wall. And you're just leaning the image there, grab a couple photos of it and send that out to the media. So you're seeing the art on the building, you're seeing the artwork calling for defunding with the logo of Chase or Bank of America, and making those connections in a safer way, if that feels best.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that. We're running up against time here. Appreciate how many people have stayed on for the discussion. And I wonder if any of my fellow panelists want to answer this question. There was a strong emphasis on demands for no expansion during the spring and summer. Should we be carrying that over into our Blame Wall Street campaigning? And is that, if so, is that equally applicable to banks, investment firms, pension funds, etc.?
I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I'm happy to answer this. Yes, it is absolutely great to carry that forward. That is what we need. No expansion is what is the bare minimum of what is necessary right now. And that remains sort of a coalition-wide demand. And yes, equally applicable for banks, insurance companies, and asset managers.
Thank you, Ariel. And a few more questions here. I think I can address a couple of these. One is, any coalition building with Third Act? Seems like we need to get Third Act to be a part of this. Yes, Third Act is a Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition member, and we work closely with a number of folks at Third Act. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, they have a pledge to move your money, a banking pledge that they're asking people to sign to say that they will commit to move their money. And Sarah leads our Customers for Climate Justice campaign, and would invite you to say anything more about this, Sarah, but we're particularly collaborating with Third Act on Move Your Money strategies is kind of the closest area of collaboration currently. And we're kind of currently strategizing on potentially organizing a Move Your Money Day of Action in 2023. TBD, we're not like publicly announcing it. I just publicly announced it to 34 people on the call, but we're not like publicly announcing it yet. Sarah, is there anything you would add to that about collaboration with Third Act?
Yeah, I would just say that we have lots of folks who are bank customers who are participating in Customers for Climate Justice. We're also third actors. So these strategies are like totally aligned, and that while you're still a bank customer, you can participate in Customers for Climate Justice strategies and meet with branch managers and advocate for climate justice at your local, at your bank, at your financial institution, and at the same time participate in these Blame Wall Street actions. So it's very much like cross collaborative and aligned, and you can participate in all of these campaigns simultaneously. And yeah, like Alex said, we're working closely with them to figure out how our strategies can best align next year when these pledges actualize. So looking forward to all of that.
Thanks, Sarah. And I think we'll just do the final two questions here. Is there anything happening in San Francisco besides the race disruption at Chase? Not that we know of, and not yet. So if you're in San Francisco, you're very welcome to organize something else. And certainly if we hear of anything else, we will publicly advertise it, put it on the map. The best way to kind of track what is happening is to just check that Action Network map and follow Stop the Money Pipeline's emails, which we'll be sending out fairly regularly. But if you're in San Francisco, hopefully you'll be able to join Alan. And I'm actually traveling there from Seattle. Erica's just shared that she's traveling there from the LA. It's going to be a very special action in San Francisco on September 20th. So hopefully if you're in the area, you're going to be able to make it and maybe even support Alan with his part of the action. And then maybe this is a good last question. This is my first time with Stop the Money Pipeline. Would you tell us a bit about how this group formed, how many folks you're working with, and how you get your funding? Do you accept interns, volunteers, etc.? I'm happy to do that. And maybe that is an appropriate question to wrap up. So Stop the Money Pipeline was launched in January of 2020 as a coalition of 32 organizations. We came together because for years, people had been campaigning on banks, people had been campaigning on insurance companies, and people had been campaigning on BlackRock. But we hadn't necessarily been talking to one another. We didn't have any sort of vehicle or infrastructure to collaborate. And so we had a retreat in the hills of Vermont in late 2019 and decided to launch Stop the Money Pipeline as a coalition of organizations working on holding the funders of the fossil fuel industry accountable. We've since grown. I think we're now a coalition of about 230 organizations, and we've grown from having no staff to having 5 staff. We have a steering committee. I think there's probably about 14 organizations on the steering committee, including Erica's organization ACRE, Friends of the Earth, Indigenous Environmental Network, Sierra Club, Rainforest Action Network, Public Citizen, Amazon Watch, and Mazaska Talks, and the GNU Collective, and a couple of other organizations. And yeah, we're very focused on banks, insurers, and investment firms and their role in the climate crisis. And obviously, there's lots of ways to tackle the climate crisis, but we think that this is a really invaluable and essential strategy. And yeah, maybe that's an appropriate place to wrap up. And I'm not sure if any of my fellow panelists or Erica, you have anything to share before we wrap up. Otherwise, we'll just move to close. Cool. Well, gratitude to all of you, and feel free to come off mute and we can say goodbye in a big mess of noise, big cacophony of noise, and we'll see you all in the streets.
Bye, everyone. Ciao.
Bye.
Boa noite.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Obrigada.
Thank
you.
Great job. Great job.